ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
Metroid Prime is blah blah blah. You all know the next entry is Metroid Ridley. Screw the build up, let's go. You've been expecting a showdown with this guy ever since he smacked you into a wall and took away your abilities, and this battle does not disappoint. Metroid Ridley starts out the battle by flying around the arena bombarding you from above, while you try to shoot him down with a healthy amount of missiles. The main challenge factor of this phase is trying to overcome Ridley's huge maneuverability advantage, so he can fly all around the arena while you are limited to a relatively small space in comparison. Plus, Ridley's attacks can destroy the cover in the boss arena fairly quickly, forcing you to keep moving if you want to stay alive. Which you'll find out is actually a pretty good idea, as Ridley's attacks hit hard. Once you've dealt enough damage to him, you'd think that'd be it, given how previous Ridley battles have played out. But Metroid Ridley flips this idea on its head by considering the fight on the ground and going all up close and personal in addition to his fireball and ground pound attacks. Naturally, your first instinct is to blast him from a distance due to him hitting like a truck, but this actually makes the battle harder as Metroid Ridley's chest-mounted weak spot is harder to hit the further away from him you are given its small size, forcing you to get close to him and rally hit and run style tactics in order to deal any reliable damage to him. This adds a sense of risk to the battle and makes Metroid Ridley much more of a serious threat than he was in the first phase. I personally feel that this battle helps set the standard of Ridley battles to come in the Metroid series, as both the battles with him from Prime 3 and Other M take great amounts of inspiration from this one. And that's the reason I'll keep looking forward to these Ridley fights every time he's resurrected for whatever bullshit reason Nintendo comes up with.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
Survival horror games never really get boss fights right. Aside from a few bosses from Resident Evil and Dead Space, plus Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2, I can't really think of a survival horror game that had a boss fight on its defining moments. That is until I played the finale of Dead Space 2. After a bunch of heavy story shit occurs that would take way too long to explain, you're forced into a sequence that takes place inside Isaac's mind, where you attempt to purge the market's influence from subconscious by fighting a hallucination of Isaac's dead girlfriend. Well, this is some serious Lovecraftian shit we got ourselves into. Nah, just an average day in the life of Isaac Clarke. Time to go to work. Admittedly, this another battle is only really here for the atmosphere and story impact rather than gameplay, but it's a climactic final battle, why the hell should you really care? This fight is fairly simple. Sure, all you have to do is shoot Mark and Nicole to open up the marker core, then blast it out a few times and you win. However, the execution is anything but. So much stuff is going on in this fight. Necromorphs are attacking you from all sides, and the market influence is slowly changing the battlefield, even snapping back to the real world at a few points. Almost to the point that you start having problems separating what is real from what is only a mere illusion. As for the boss itself, its only attack is really walking towards you and trying to touch you. If it touches you, you die. It's fairly simple. Granted, it can take it a while to whittle down its health enough to expose the marker core. While this may be pretty basic, the symbolism of Isaac forcibly ejecting the marker's power over him from his mind is nothing short of epic. Although what truly sells the battle for me is Isaac himself. At this point in the story, Isaac is done. He's fed up with everything he's been put through and he is downright pissed.
Damn it, I trusted you! Fuck you! And fuck your marker!
Isaac's comment throughout this battle sort of straddled the line between the completely badass and the utterly hilarious, and really add to the emotion of this battle, especially that previous clip I just showed you. Talk about a huge step up from the hive mind. Man, that fight was terrible.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
When it comes down to it, Devil May Cry is a game series that just does whatever the hell it wants. So much so that by the time the final battle of Devil May Cry 3 rolled around, I'd already seen so much crazy shit that I had the mindset that nothing this game could throw at me would faze me any more than it already had. So when the final battle of this game was revealed to be a duel between two practically immortal half-demon demigods into the demon underworld, I basically had to take a step back and wait for my brain to reboot itself. And I promptly dropped my controller after the first 5 seconds of this fight where Virgil moved faster than I could even blink. This battle is thematically similar to the Mataluman fight, if someone took that fight and injected it with about 200 shots of adrenaline. Virgil is fast, able to trap you in ridiculous combos and attack so hard he breaks the very fabric of space and time, which actually deals way less damage than I expect from an attack like that. Virgil's other attacks are no slouches either, apart from the previously mentioned inhuman combos and reality breaker attack. Virgil's attacks are very similar to your own, minus the guns, and he even has access to his own Devil Trigger. Naturally, this battle is possibly the hardest battle in the list, no thanks to Devil May Cry's 3 infamous ball-busting difficulty level due to Capcom's shipping screw-up. meaning that your parrying and dodging skills have to be almost flawless if you want to stay alive. But thanks to Devil May Cry's seamless combat system, you shouldn't really have all that much of a problem doing it. This battle also surprisingly has an emotional undertone to it, which is something rarely seen in games like Devil May Cry, because of the nature of this fight. If Dante wins, he saves the world from a demon apocalypse, but at the same time he loses his own brother. The music helps convey this feeling, being a more emotional violin piece compared to the hard rock soundtrack of the rest of the game. Sure, Virgil might be an evil douche, but we get the feeling that Dante at least cares somewhat about his brother's well-being. Kinda sad when Virgil refused to let Dante save him at the end, if you think about it.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
While Devil May Cry set the bar as to what we could do in a fast-paced action game, No More Heroes took one look at that and threw it out the window entirely, by being not just filled with over-the-top violence and action that wouldn't look out of place in a Quentin Tarantino movie, but also having what are possibly some of the best boss fights ever designed, such as our number 7 entry, Henry. Basically, it's a lightsaber duel between an otaku assassin and his Irish twin brother in a motel parking lot, while a kick-ass Inhuman guitar solo plays in the background. You've been itching to fight this guy ever since he killed the rank 6 assassin you were denied your chance for revenge, so now it's time for all that foreshadowing to finally pay off. Henry's attacks are capable of dealing a fair amount of damage to you fairly quickly and can force you in a never-ending block stance which will drain your beam katana's batteries faster than those of the Wii U's gamepad, forcing you to have mastered the dodge mechanic by this point. But given how this is the final fight in the game, you should have already done that by now. He can also launch exploding energy balls out of his weapon. It's No More Heroes, don't question it. And he has an admittedly flashy one-hit kill move, but you'll only really get hit by it if you just stand still and let it happen, but that's beside the point. However, aside from these attacks, a majority of Henry's moves are relatively similar to Travis's, meaning that we have yet another fight that plays out like a battle of equals. Hint, I like this trend. However, the main reason I like this battle is due to how it serves as a satisfying ending to a game like No More Heroes. Not because it serves as a satisfying and pretty amazing final boss, thanks to the excellent gameplay and atmosphere, although that is one of the many reasons. No, it's because of what happens at the end. Most games would use the ending cutscene to tie up any loose end of the story. Not this game. What we got instead was a hilariously rushed explanation to Henry's origins, which Travis lampshades by pointing out why you shouldn't reveal something this big at the end of the game. In any other game, this wouldn't work at all, but given the type of game that No More Heroes is, this ends up being a pretty decent bit of comedy. This is then followed by a freeze-flame splash of Henry and Travis leaping at each other before panning out and Sylvia making a tongue-in-cheek joke about sequel hooks. It actually ties in pretty well with the nature of the game. Not bad for a game that's 9 years old at this point. But what else would you expect from a mad genius like Suda51?
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
So, Kingdom Hearts. This series has a plethora of amazing boss fights which are all deserving of a spot on this list, so naturally I had a really hard time choosing which boss was my favourite out of the franchise. So in order to narrow it down, I replayed all the Kingdom Hearts games that I own to determine which game in the series had the best collection of boss fights, eventually settling on Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. And good lord does this game have an amazing selection of bosses. The Ground Shaker, Luxord, Zaldin, that amazing fight against Roxas, which is a very close honorable mention of this list, and the insane secret bosses Sephiroth and the Lingering Will, along with the Organization 13 data battles. So, after careful consideration, the one boss that I eventually chose for this entry was none other than the leader of Organization 13, Xemnas. This battle is, without a doubt, the longest battle on this list, with at least 5 stages, moving all around a variety of technical battlegrounds and testing your skill at pretty much every game mechanic, and that's not just limited to the game's combat systems. Reaction commands, gummy ship controls, 3D plane movement, platforming, your knowledge of practically everything is put to the test. Even if your skill at the game is pretty incredible, don't think you'll be able to just breeze through this battle, as the battle is one gigantic marathon. Starting out fighting Xemnas in his most basic form in the city outside the castle that never was, then taking on Xemnas in his dragon form, then taking on his armoured form while he attacks you with the weapons of the fallen Organization members, before destroying some targets on the outside of the previous phase, before challenging his armoured form for a second time. All of these phases are fun to an extent and allow Square Enix to show off their skill at making flashy visuals and downright insane set pieces, including a scene where you deny physics and rip the side of a building, and another point where you slice a skyscraper in half with your keyblade. Although the best part of the fight is the final phase. After fighting your way through that gauntlet of phases, Xemnas puts on his dressing gown of ultimate power, gives you a quick speech attempting to justify his actions, and then begins the final phase of the battle. This phase is essentially the first phase on crack. Xemnas moves a lot faster, attacking with incredibly powerful and frenzied attacks consisting of either rapid-fire, long-range attacks, or flurries of close-range slashes with his musical blades. He can also attack with those weird, nothingless thorn things, which can deal a fair amount of damage if they connect. The set pieces in this phase are no slouches either. There's the pretty tense and frantic section halfway through the battle where you take control of Riku while you hit the same sword from Xemnas, and there's the ending where you... Holy crap, look at this crazy shit! Xemnas bombards Sora and Riku with a huge onslaught of lasers, and the two of them proceed to deflect the entire bombardment. Granted, the whole segment is just a fair amount of button mashing, but it's really not all that aggravating. Here's hoping that the final boss of Kingdom Hearts 3 managed to live up the incredible standard set by this one.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
I stand by with what I said in my second most hated boss battles list, in that the majority of Mario bosses are hit or miss. Some end up being so pathetic that they go down in less than 10 seconds, some end up being so boring and average that they come and go without even making an impact, but then we get those that we can never forget. Like Bowser Jr.'s Boomsday Machine from Super Mario Galaxy 2. Weird choice for an entry, I know, especially when you compare it to bosses like the final battles of Yoshi's Island and Super Mario 3D World, or even Megaleg from the original Mario Galaxy. But this battle has a sort of unique charm to it that just keeps making me come back for more. In my opinion, the better bosses from the Mario games are the ones that test your skill at platforming rather than the combat. Granted, I don't mind it if combat is involved or is the main focus, but I tend to get the most enjoyment out of the platforming types of battles. This battle actually managed to get an almost perfect balance between the combat and the platforming. This battle primarily involves the use of what is possibly the best of the new power-ups introduced in Galaxy 2, the Cloud Flower. What you need to do is ride the wind currents and then use your cloud platforms to reach the top of the boss and then ground pound it. It sounds simple in concept, but like the majority of things in Mario games, it's anything but an execution. The majority of the Boomsday Machine's attacks are designed to trip you up, mainly by preventing you getting close to it, or by destroying your cloud platforms, interrupting your ability to make more. Plus, when the machine is on its last hit point, it pulls itself out of the ground, gaining tank tries along with a height boost, making it harder to get to its weak spot. It also gains a new attack, where it electrifies its body, pulling any and all cloud platforms in the unit towards it, destroying them and damaging you if you manage to get hit by it. Personally, I never really had any trouble with the attack all that much, seeing as I found that your long jumps can pretty outlast it. Still, despite this and the rest of the fight being actually pretty easy, it's a still quite enjoyable, memorable experience, which is why it stuck with me all this time.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
So, Sonic. Yeah, its boss fights have a very trucky track record, much like the franchise itself, especially when it comes to the various so-called rival fights. While there are a few ones that are honestly pretty good, like the Sonic vs Blaze fight from Sonic Rush, the battle against Johnny and Captain Whisker from Rush Adventure, and of course the classic Sonic vs Shadow fight from Sonic Adventure 2, the rest are kind of... meh. But then Sonic Generations rolled around and we got possibly the best selection of boss battles in the series, and the best of these was possibly the most surprising: Silver. How in the hell did we go from one of the most broken and terribly designed boss fights of all time to one of the fastest paced and enjoyable boss fights in the Sonic series? No longer are we trudging around a plaza while Silver cheap shots you, you're racing down a rune highway in one of my favourite levels in the Sonic series. When I say that this fight is fast paced, I mean it, as a good variety of Silver attacks require a decent reaction time in order to avoid, and should you fail to dodge them, they will hurt. A lot. As for these attacks, they're a lot more varied and way less cheap than the Silver fight in 06. Instead of infinite loop telekinetic attacks, Silver pulls out all kinds of flashy attacks that greatly show off his psychic powers. He can pick up cars and shipping containers with telekinesis and attempt to crush you flat, pick up a huge collection of debris and pelt you with a flurry of fast and heavy hitting attacks, form a battering ram out of debris, and even form a blade out of pure psychic energy. Like I said earlier, you do need to react quickly in order to dodge them, but the window for doing so is long enough to allow you to actually process what's happening, but short enough to not be insultingly easy. But the most insane attack only happens when Silver is on his last hit point. What happens? He basically unleashes an attack straight up Katamari Damacy. In this section of the fight, the camera angle changes and the fight switches from a precision-based duel to a section which basically forces you to just get the hell out of the way, while dodging more of Silver's attacks. Not bad for the character that gave us, well, this.
No use! It's no use! It's no use! It's no use!
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
So, Girahim. Fitting that arguably the best Zelda villain is arguably the best fight in the Zelda series. While Skyward Sword's motion control swordblade has received a fair amount of criticism, the boss fights in this game do manage to make it work to create some pretty amazing fights. Thanks to the control setup of the game, it honestly feels like you are personally beating the living shit out of your foes, and when you screw up, it feels like it was a mistake that you made rather than a problem with the game's control system. What I'm basically trying to say here is that Skyward Sword's motion control actually helps the boss fights rather than hinder them, and the one fight to get the most mileage out of this is the final fight against Girahim. As the fight starts, Girahim switches into Ultimate Chocolate Mode, and sends you high into the air by means of a hard-light platform. This phase of the fight is fairly simple. All you do is try to force him off the platform and finish him off with the mother of all drop stabs. The Spire's got nothing on this guy. Naturally, Girahim's not just going to stand there and let you knock him around a bit. Like in the first two fights with him, Girahim raises his arms up to block your sword swings, but this time instead of catching your sword between his fingers, he'll charge up his hands with this weird energy thing. Should you hit his hands this time, he'll switch places with you, before following up the Haymaker Punch or Roundhouse Kick. Once you knock him off the platform a few times, you finally get back to ground level, and after delivering the mother of all drop stabs to the Demon Lord's chest, it's time for Skyward Sword to do what he does best. Sword fights. Girahim starts off this fight by using the same sword that he used the previous fights with him. Actually, what kind of sword is that? It looks like a mixture of scimitar, saber, rapier, and scythe sword. Yes, they're real. Look them up. Weird sword aside, Girahim's apparently picked up a few new tricks since the fight of the Fire Sanctuary, as he adds a few new combos to his regular attacks, and even has a dark version of your own Skyward Strike, and while you can just dodge his attack, it's way more satisfying if you match the timing of your shield bash and then right back at him, or even better, cancel it out with your own Skyward Strike. Once you've dealt enough damage to him by slashing the incredibly obvious weak spot on his chest, Girahim switches to a huge claymore which you have to chip away to open him up to attack. Although, be careful, he will change the orientation of his sword to keep you on your toes, and his attacks with that sword do quite a bit of damage. Once you've depleted his health once more, you deliver the most intense final blow in any Wii game, bringing a truly satisfying conclusion to this high-stakes fight.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
God of War is, you know what, screw it, you know where this is going. Poseidon, it's good to see you, buddy. When it comes to starting off a game right, you'd be hard-pressed to find better examples in the God of War series. The first game pitted you against the Hydra, the second started you off with fighting the Colossus of Rhodes, and God of War 3 decides it'll start you off with a fight against the God of the Sea. No less than 10 minutes in, and you're tasked with slaughtering Poseidon. If that's not starting off strong, I don't know what is. Poseidon comes out swinging from the battle's start, attacking in full force with his giant avatar of himself, huge tendrils made of water, crab legs, and typical stuff you find on the sea floor, mysterious horse creatures called hippocampi made of the same materials, and, oddly enough, shockwaves and lightning attacks. Well, I guess it makes some sense. Poseidon is also the god of storms, earthquakes, and, oddly enough, horses, in addition to being the god of the seas. Yet, it's rare to see these aspects explored, so kudos to David Jaffe, I guess. Admittedly, this fight doesn't really have much in the gameplay factor, but with the majority of quick-time events and set pieces, but given how I'm a sucker for flashy set pieces, it's not much of a problem. Plus, both are something that God of War implements rather well, and with the QTEs in particular, they can lead to some of the fight's more cinematic moments, especially when you rip the lower jaw from the hippocampi. Ah, damn, that's brutal! And there's also the point where you punch Poseidon's water avatar so hard that his real body is forcibly ejected from it. But that's kind of standard stuff in a God of War game, so this kind of thing is really just an everyday occurrence at this point. Although the best way that this fight, and by extension pretty much every fight in the series, the best way that this fight implements QTEs is the finisher, where we're treated to a first-person beatdown that Kratos unleashes on Poseidon. From Poseidon's perspective. Every blow in this sequence feels even more savage and satisfying than the last due to the rather unique perspective, eventually culminating in one of the most brutal button prompts to ever be programmed into a video game. Ouch.
And it ends here. Okay. Let's dance!
Given my previous love for a certain stealth franchise, it's very surprising that we haven't seen it at all on this list. If you're wondering what that franchise is, it's a small series of games known as Metal Gear. Doubt you've heard of it. However, while our number one entry is from a Metal Gear game, we'll have to look outside the main series. Oh, now that's more like it!
While I do love the tactical espionage action of the main games, nothing can really top the over-the-top, borderline ridiculous action of the spin-off, Metal Gear Rising. I honestly could have chosen pretty much any of Rising's boss fights to take them in one slot. Well, except for Monsoon, that fight wasn't very good. So, you're probably wondering just who I picked. Well, who else would it have been? So, yeah, my favourite boss fight is none other than Jetstream Sam from Metal Gear Rising. For a start, Sam himself has a pretty complex rivalry with Raiden, which all stemmed after he slashed out Raiden's eye, hacked off his arm, threw him off a speeding train, and left him for dead. Throughout the rest of the game, Sam's been a thorn in his side, even making Raiden suffer PTSD and shift back into his Jack the Ripper persona, so naturally you're wanting another duel with this guy. And boy does this game deliver. For a start, the setting is like something out of a samurai movie. Two evenly matched swordsmen dueling one last time in the middle of the desert. At sunset. Because reasons. It's strange, you have a game where most of the bosses, either giant robots, have a ridiculously flashy weapon or gimmick, but arguably the best boss fight is the only one that doesn't. Weird how that works, isn't it? Naturally, Sam's attacks are pretty much the exact same as yours, forcing you to have mastered parrying attacks by now, and if you haven't, well, you're not exactly going to have a good time. Sure, you can disarm when his health gets low enough, although don't think that once you disarm him that the fight is going to get easier, as he's perfectly able to go toe-to-toe with you with just his fist and feet. I honestly found that harder, as while Sam's fisticuffs and kickboxing deal less damage than his sword swings, they also come at you much faster than his regular attacks, and their small size makes them harder to parry. He can even block your own sword swings with his bare hands. Don't worry if that sounds like too much of a problem, as it is possible for him to pick his sword back up if he gets close enough to where it fell. Finally, after one hell of an intense sword fight, Raiden finishes off his foe with a swift stab to the gut, rather than slice him into tiny pieces like all the other boss fights up until now. Possibly as a sign of respect for his foe. That's actually pretty deep for a game about a cybernetic ninja running around ripping out people's spines. Yeah, I doubt he needed that anyway. I'm the Cyber Engineer, and Jetstream Sam is honestly my favourite boss fight of all time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.